Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. Remember to subscribe to our free podcast so you won't miss any of our inspiring content. Here is episode 142.
My big focus is on how do you use mindfulness to create change in your life, and what does that look like, and holding your hand through that process.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Kerry Foreman. Kerry Foreman is a psychotherapist mindfulness coach who is passionate about writing and speaking about our journey to mental health. She ditches the clinical speak and talks about what it takes to be happy. Kerry finds peace in hiking therapy in the beautiful Colorado, where she lives with her husband of 17 years and her kids Cole and Miley and 2 rescue dogs. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's always such a fun thing to talk about of how we can work on our mindfulness. And I'm excited to speak about your mission of mindfulness. But before we do that, please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I am a 44 almost year-old brand new counselor is really what it comes down to. I call myself a counselor sometimes. Sometimes I call myself a psychotherapist. I've worked in many other areas. I was in sales for years. I was in real estate. I did many different things and nothing fit. Never saw myself as a school person and decided to go back to school in my 30s. And then just kept going. And the first person in my whole family to even go and get my bachelor's, and just realized, okay, I can do this. And I kept going and graduated with a master's in mental health counseling. And I'm a registered psychotherapist here in Colorado, but I do work nationally with coaching for mindfulness. I started as a school counselor for the first about 4.5 years, and worked my way into my own practice. And I'm a writer and a speaker as well. And it's the closing of a circle for me. I had always felt like this is what I was supposed to be doing, was helping others. But when you have a label put on yourself as I am this or I am not this, it just limits your possibilities. And the minute that I took that label off, I was able to figure out who I am and how I could help.
That is great. Well, and let's talk a little bit more about that journey of what it looked like that led you to discover what you love to do now. You know, how did you finally decide to take that label off and find your mission?
Well, it wasn't accidental. It was kind of accidental. I was staying at home with my children, and I stayed at home with both of them until my youngest entered kindergarten, and it just didn't fit for me. I struggled with depression. I struggled with anxiety, and I struggled with a lot of different areas, which now I chalk up to crafting other people's image of me. I was invested in trying to figure out who I was supposed to be in other people's eyes. And I went back to school because I hadn't finished my bachelor's degree. I originally went to get my bachelor's at the normal time when everybody does, but struggled. And I did a lot of partying, and I wound up dropping out of college and running a Bath and Body Works. And felt like, you know what, as long as I'm making a decent living, then I'm perfectly fine. And I went along with that until I started talking to my children about them going to college and about what do you want to be when you get older, and you can do anything you want, and starting to craft what that looked like for them and work with them to decide what that looked like. And I felt like a fraud. I felt like I was not living my passion. So how can I instruct my children that the most important thing in life is to be happy and is to feel passionate about what you get to do every day, not feel like I have to go to a job and I have to work, but that I get to work? How do we shift that for them? And I felt like if I was going to preach that, then I had to practice that. And went back to school, had a 4.0 when I graduated with my bachelor's, and really sent out I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a mental health professional in some capacity. Applied. Nobody, like I said, nobody in my family had gone to even get their bachelor's. So applying for graduate school, I felt like a huge imposter. And when I got accepted to the University of Northern Colorado, I even went into those classes thinking, well, they probably had to fill a spot. This isn't a huge program. They probably needed to fill a spot, not thinking about that I had a really great GPA, not thinking about I have all this experience, life experience and work experience, and those work for me. I just felt like an imposter. So that's really, there was a whole process to me working through those feelings.
Wow. Well, and that goes perfectly with the psychotherapy, correct?
Absolutely. It does. Most of us in this field had some stuff to work out ourselves. I've maybe met one or two people in the field of psychology that say, oh, no, I had this perfect childhood and I had a perfect, background and everything went swimmingly for me. Most of us dealt with some of our own issues, and through exploring that and processing that, I think it makes us better professionals.
Exactly. So, and I really admire you about being such a wonderful mentor to your kids. I think a lot of times as parents, we push that dream to them, but we don't seize that. And then we wonder why our kids, aren't living up to their full potential. It definitely takes that mentoring. So tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind your mission and your passion. You said you were a school counselor and then you worked into your own practice. How did all that come about?
That piece, I just really work better for myself. What I struggled with in school counseling, to be specific, was that I would get these wonderful little beings in front of me, and I could affect change in that room with them. I could hear what they were struggling with. I could give them some suggestions. We could work through some things. But school counseling, there's a lot of Band-Aid action going on. So you're kind of putting a Band-Aid on it. You're getting them right back out the door so they don't miss much education. And that's just not how I work. I'm very clinical in that I want to follow that thought pattern that you're having. I want to help grab it when it rears its ugly head. And I want to be able to talk to your parents and say, hey, here's what's happening. And you're a part of this too. And we need the whole family to come together to fix this problem. Your child is not the problem. The system is the problem. And in school counseling, I found that really hard to do because I had to slap a Band-Aid on it and send them back many times, send them back to the exact same situation that was the root of a lot of their issues. And I have a very high need to be effective, which is not always a great thing in my line of work. But I just knew that the best route for my skills was to be in private practice so that if I felt like, you know what, today we're going to go an hour and a half instead of an hour, then I can do that. And I can help people create the change that they want to see by saying, if it's a child, well, I need to work with the whole family because we're not going to scapegoat the child. Or if it's an adult, okay, let's take a look at what's working and what's not working, and let's learn some real skills around it. I call myself a progressive psychotherapist and of the progressive school of psychology because I am not a counselor who sits back and asks, how does that feel? I'm very invested in let's skill build. Let's find out where your unhealthy coping skills are and let's build around that, whether you're a child or whether you're a grown adult.
Yeah, well, and I feel like being effective, you said you wanted to be effective and not just put Band-Aids on things, really does drive that mission and passion. It's really no fun when we're just skimming the surface and not really being able to live that, mission or that feeling very passionately and, productively. So awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, what were some challenges that you felt like you had along the way, and what did you learn from them? You know, we talked about your own mental blocks that you had. Were there other challenges that you had?
Yeah, I feel like I have had more challenges than some and less than a lot is kind of how I describe it. I don't think my story is that much different than a lot of people or that much worse, but I do come from a family with a pretty high level of dysfunction. There was abuse in my family in many different forms growing up, and the only way I can explain it, I wrote an article about this as well, is that I had this voice within me that kept me on track. When things would be said to me that would hurt me or that would get in my head, this voice would come around and say, it's not you, it's them. They're not thinking straight, or they have this issue or that issue, and you're going to come through this and you're going to be okay. And so I think coming from a family of dysfunction and some abuse was one of my big challenges. And it led to a lot of faulty thinking patterns, a lot of irrational thinking. And that put me on a path to just living, not being happy, just putting one foot in front of the other. I had some coping skills that didn't fit with healthy people. They fit with unhealthy people. I married a very healthy man, mentally healthy, who came from a very mentally healthy family. And I had some over-the-top reactions the first few years of our marriage. And I would respond in ways, or react, because it was not a response. I would react in ways that were old story stuff. I was defensive. I was coming from a place of insecurity and assuming motivations of other people and what they thought of me. And really, mindfulness was the way out of that for me. So once I was able to find mindfulness and start practicing mindfulness, it really was the path out for me. And I don't shy away from saying that I was on antidepressants for several years. That was not the path out for me. And from what I hear from a lot of my clients, it isn't the path out for many of them. You have to learn new skills. You have to retrain your brain. And so a big challenge for me was my old story and figuring out what good things can I take from my old story? How can my old story serve me, and how can it serve other people? And I think that I'm doing that through my writing, just being really authentic in who I am and who I come from, which is really wonderful, good people who tried their best, but they were part of a cycle as well, and were not able to recognize that cycle. I grabbed a hold of it, was able to recognize the cycle, and I put a stop to it with my family. And I think being a cycle breaker is one of the things that I'm the most proud of, and the cycle was my biggest challenge.
Yeah. Well, and those self-defeating thoughts sometimes do go back generations, where we pick up those mental blocks from parents, which they picked it up from their parents and stuff. And so hopefully every generation you're able to kind of learn and help each other be better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it's about. It's not about looking back and blaming. It's about looking back and seeing, what can I use from this story moving forward, and how can each generation look better?
That's wonderful. So tell me, how do you feel like your paradigm has changed over time and with experience? When you first got into your mission and things that you love to do, how has it changed to now what you're doing with your therapy?
I think that... So I'm traditionally trained. I went to University of Northern Colorado, which has an amazing counseling program there. We do not go over mindfulness in that. I did my practicum at a place called Noeticus in Denver, and they are a mindful-based program. So we just kind of slipped into that and started practicing it. It became a way of life. And before I realized I was changing things, things were changed. And so I think what I originally thought and dreamed of was, yes, I would be in private practice and I would be a traditional counselor. And that isn't exactly what it looks like. What it turned out that my skills are in my ideas, and my ideas are based in old story, present story, and what I want my future story to look like. And I had a lot of head trash around what it is to be a woman. And I was bound and determined that I was not going to have somebody in my life for financial reasons. I was bound and determined that I wouldn't ever be in a position, because I had seen this happen in my family. I would never be in a position where I had to stay with somebody because I couldn't support myself or I couldn't support my children. And so I figured out that's where my need to be effective came from. But it also came from this feeling of I don't ever want to feel weak. Whatever that looked like to me, I never wanted to feel weak. I wanted to feel strong. And when I worked as a school counselor, it gave me a chance to work with a lot of girls, a lot of young women, tweens and teens, and take a look inside their minds and see what they were dealing with what society puts on us, with what our families put on us, role expectations, how faith comes into that, if faith comes into that, and where I could help with that. And it turned out that this mindfulness thing that I had been practicing for several years really worked great for kids too. I started using it. My son deals with some anxiety, and my daughter just deals with being a tween and a girl. And I started incorporating it into their lives. I responded instead of reacting. I spoke a little bit slower and maybe a little bit softer. The modeling that I was doing made them respond differently to me. And so I started integrating it in. I came up with a bedtime ritual. And at night, we practiced some different mindfulness things where we asked for help, where we needed help. We showed what we were grateful for in our day. And we talked about what we were wowed by that day. It might be, the sun coming up over the mountains or whatever it was, what we could find in nature that was amazing to us, that was just a gift to us that day. And we really started to hone in on the present moment, being aware of the present moment and what is happening around us. And I saw my children change through that. And I started applying it to young girls that I would work with in my office. And I came up with this grounded girls idea, which is working with tween girls and teen girls on learning mindfulness, finding a happy place inside of us, not attaching our happiness to a boy or to grades or to how good of a Christian am I? Or if I'm agnostic, what does that look like? Should I feel guilty for that? Not attaching it to that stuff, not attaching it to guilt, not attaching it to who society expects us to be, just finding the happy place inside of us, which provides us a sense of peace. And we have access to that at all times. So I think that my paradigm has really shifted in that I was just thrilled to have my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I was thrilled to have that and just expected that I would just go on like most counselors and do my job every day. And it just turned out that I needed a little more. I felt like my specific skills were in helping certain parts of the population. And right now that looks like girls and teaching them mindfulness.
One of the things that I'm kind of getting from what you're saying is we all have vulnerabilities, but we have been, especially as women, our vulnerabilities have been like, well, you're not good enough to support yourself or you're not good enough. But that also, when we have those vulnerabilities, maybe it can create some really unhealthy relationships. But we still need to keep those. Maybe you need to explain a little bit more about what mindfulness is, but what I'm understanding mindfulness to be is that we do open up vulnerabilities to people, but in a way of connecting with them and not in a way of dependency. Is that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, thank you for that. I didn't even think about the confusion in that. Yeah, it's not in a way of dependency. It is in a way of vulnerability. The vulnerability to be exactly who you are and to show yourself enough kindness and compassion and to show yourself enough empathy that you have enough to give away. Because when the person on the receiving end of whatever transaction you have going, whether it's just a conversation with somebody or a meeting or whatever it is, the person on the other end of that, if they feel seen by you, not judged by you, but seen by you, then it completely changes that relationship. It takes it to a whole nother level. So mindfulness is explained as present moment awareness. I kind of put some of myself into what I teach with mindfulness, and it looks a little bit more like self-awareness. Where can I be really hyper-aware at first of where am I feeling this in my body? So for example, if I'm hypersensitive to feeling like I'm weak, I don't want to be weak, I don't want to be at the mercy of a situation, then you always feel it in your body first. That's our warning system. So we bring a lot of awareness to where am I feeling that in my body? Then what is the thought that's attached to that? There's always a thought. And sometimes we have so many thoughts that we're not able to decipher between them. We're not able to choose which ones we participate in. We just participate in all of them. We're on autopilot. And we're just participating in all these thoughts. And it's taking us on this journey that we didn't say was okay. So it really
causes maybe you to react versus respond. Yeah,
absolutely it does, because there's some neuroscience involved in it as well. But so you have I call it a hot amygdala, and it prevents things. If you have anxiety, if you have depression, defensiveness, different character traits, it prevents things from getting to your frontal lobe. Well, that's where the emotional awareness is. That's where the logical reasoning is. So if my amygdala, and to young girls I call her Amy the amygdala, if she won't let anything get past to the emotional awareness and to the logical reasoning part, then she's just operating and reacting from this hot place of insecurity or assuming your motivation or whatever is going on in my head that day. I may not even be able to decipher what I'm acting from because I've got 700 thoughts an hour. So it's really slowing that whole process down, just being where I am, allowing myself to be aware of what is happening in me. And that has nothing to do with anybody else. Nobody caused that. Nobody put that on me. It's happening in me. And then where's my accountability? How can I be accountable for whatever's happening in my life, whatever's happening in my relationships? Where is my accountability? And then that really important empathy part, which is empathy towards myself first. Of course, I'm reacting from this place. My brain is used to reacting from this place because growing up, it had to react from this place. So that's what empathy sounds like to myself is, I get it. You're coming from this place that you know. And then empathy for the other person. How must it feel to them when I react from that place? There's probably confusion. There's probably them feeling defensive, like they have to defend themselves. And then it creates this back and forth that neither of us ever wanted. So yeah, it's not about not being vulnerable. I am more vulnerable to the people that I love in my life, and really more vulnerable to anybody I come in contact with now, because I'm able to be authentic. I'm able to talk to you, Rebecca, without feeling like I'm being judged. And even if I am being judged, guess what? That's okay.
Well, and yeah, that vulnerability does create that authenticity that I think is missing a lot in our society. Especially as women and girls, we feel like we have to play a part of what somebody else may think about how we need to live our lives. That's great. Before we go on, let's listen to this message. Recently, the Luminous Mind became an affiliate for EduSense, which offers tremendous discounts on educational supplies. I personally use EduSense to purchase our family supplies because of their great prices, responsive shipping times, and best of all, the chance to earn EduBucks, which I use towards future purchases. Who doesn't love a great deal within a deal? To get a 90% savings on your EduSense materials, go to theluminousmind.net and click on the sponsor page to find the affiliate link. Start using EduSense to illuminate your educational experience. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Kerry Foreman, creating grounded minds towards happiness. So tell me a little bit more about the things that you're doing in your practice. You mentioned the things that you're doing with the girls. Tell us what you do with some of your patients, and then also maybe some successes that you've seen. I guess maybe patience isn't a good word to use.
No, it's fine. I call them clients, but there's a lot of people call them patients, so that's appropriate. I call them clients just because I like to meet them where they are, and I don't know. I think that's probably part of the whole imposter thing to me. I don't feel like a big expert, so I don't call them patients. But
well, and when you're talking down to somebody, sometimes they're not going to listen to you as well as if they feel like there's that you're working together, not, working on them.
For sure. And we're equals. We're equals in the room. I've been through it, and all I'm doing is reaching my hand out to help you come to the other side of it too. So the thing I'm the most excited about is my Grounded Girls program, which is a national program. I Skype in for the lessons. We also have a couple groups here in Colorado, but those I'm able to actually be at, and we hike at the end and things like that. But the ones that are national, I Skype in for those lessons. They're still able to do a hike or a beach walk or whatever it is that they want to do at the end, but we just process it a little bit differently. I'm a mindfulness coach as well, and we do that through Skype. So it does not matter where you live. I am able to be obtained for service in that way, where I just help people figure out, where is the need? Where is the problem? What are your goals? Let's separate this out. And then let's follow the thoughts. Let's figure out what's leading to some of the issues that you're experiencing. And through that, I'm teaching them mindfulness and coaching them on how to integrate that mindfulness into their everyday lives. Because sometimes what happens through some of the classes that maybe if you take a beginning mindfulness course online, you learn the skills. You develop a great sitting practice where 15 minutes a day you sit and you just pay attention to your thoughts, and you know the acronym for letting those unhealthy thoughts go, and you know all the speak that you're supposed to know, but you don't exactly know how to integrate it into your everyday life. Okay, that's great. I know these skills. Now, how do I use them? And my big focus is on, how do you use mindfulness to create change in your life? And what does that look like? And holding your hand through that process. And then I also have a private practice here in Colorado where I just see clients here in the office and work with them one-on-one. I don't always use mindfulness. I would say with 90% of my patients, I do use mindfulness. I prefer mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy. It's kind of mixed together, and my own personality is in there as well. And I'm also a hiking therapist. So some of my clients and I go out on individual hikes together, and we practice mindfulness along the way and when we get to the top. There's something to be said for the whole bilateral stimulation that happens when you are hiking, and how fast you are able to process through different issues because of that bilateral stimulation. And you're also incorporating your five senses and just that vitamin D. It's so important. I know I'm dealing with a lot of clients right now who are struggling with seasonal affective disorder because the sun is scarce right now. So the biggest victories that I have had with clients have come in the clients who have just really accepted mindfulness and really worked it hard. I have a young man that I see who had never seen a therapist before, and he came in with rage issues. For his whole life, he had been raging against people he loved and didn't love them any less, wasn't angry at anyone. It's just this rage would be triggered, and he reacted from this hot amygdala, and he had no coping skills around dealing with anger. And he really embraced the mindfulness message. We talked about how you have to have a mind that is open to anything and attached to no outcome. And that is a really hard place to get to. You have to believe that whatever outcome you get is the outcome you're supposed to get, even if it's not the one you were wishing for. And he really embraced that. He developed a sitting practice within the first 4 sessions. He changed his breathing, which breathing is a huge part of changing how your body feels. And he just really worked hard in between our sessions. And a guy who I thought would probably be in therapy with me for quite some time. After, I'd say 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, I put him on a maintenance plan, which is once a month, because he took the skills that I taught him and he integrated them into everything. He didn't just integrate them into how do I deal with rage. He integrated them into how do I deal with my girlfriend when she's reacting in a way I don't enjoy? How do I deal with my mom when she's enabling me? How do I deal with this and deal with that? He integrated it into everything. And so I would say my biggest victories are the clients who are ready for change.
Well, and I love that integration, like you said. I mean, sometimes we can learn those skills, but actually being able to implement that into our lives is really the difference with the success.
Yeah, it really is, because you can learn skills all day. If your negative thinking patterns are really working for you and you are really rooted in hanging on to those, there's nothing I'm going to teach you that will change that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about why you feel like hiking is how that got implemented into your practice and why you keep using that as a technique.
Well, I think that as with most things, as professionals, we use what works for us. And I began hiking because I was dealing with high anxiety and I had started practicing mindfulness, and I live here in the Rockies. And I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to start hiking. I can't believe I haven't, explored this and seen what's out here. I'm from Indiana originally, so we're very flat there. And we did not do any traveling growing up. I think we did one trip to Kings Island in Ohio, and that was a big deal for us. So moving to Colorado felt like a different planet to me. I wasn't sure what I was coming into. And I just started making myself, at the beginning, hike 3 times a week. Short little hikes where I felt comfortable and safe. And I would notice at the end, I just had this euphoria. I had a feeling of less weight on my shoulders, less weight on my chest. My thoughts didn't ruminate as much. I was able to control this, when they circle around and around and around and you feel like, oh my God, I can't get rid of this thought. I was able to do that easier when I was hiking. And I noticed just a real ease in that with hiking. And then I began to practice mindfulness when I would get to the top. And I began to integrate climbing into that because, really setting a goal and it being a big challenge for me was something that processed any issues that I had. And I began to use it with my clients pretty early on because I had some really great clients when I very first started my practice that just were open to, what do you have to teach me? Because I'm a sponge, which is awesome. If there's any counselors or mental health professionals listening, that's what you want. You're just like, yes, I'm ready. And we would hike together, and we found that we would really work through a lot more issues in one hiking session than we did just sitting on our rumps in an office. It just opened up a whole new world for that. I think the vitamin D from the sun was a huge part of that. As a society,
fresh air, probably.
Yes. As a society, the urbanization of our areas is massive, and we have less and less nature that we come in contact with. And because of that, many professionals feel like there's an increased rate of mental illness because of that.
Environmental depression type thing.
Absolutely. And, we feel it. I talk to many moms every day, a lot of them clients, that talk about, oh my gosh, I need the sun to come out because this is just driving me nuts. Well, getting out in that actually releases endorphins into your body. And that's the happy drug. That's the, hey, I feel better. Your serotonin levels change. And we integrate all 5 senses. When we're hiking, sometimes we close our eyes just for a few steps, obviously, and just focus on what we can smell. Then we try and shut off our other senses and just focus on what we can hear. Then just what you feel on your skin. Can you feel the wind on a certain spot on your neck? Just bring your focus to that. That ability to direct your thoughts helps in your everyday life. It translates when you go back to the office, when you go back to driving your kids back and forth to school. That's a skill to be able to direct your thoughts. And being out in nature, whether you have the Rockies out your back door or not, gives you a place to go to in your mind when stress is really high.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that you mentioned kind of while you were talking, but I wanted to really point it out, is that, when we make that goal to climb, there's so many life lessons in just the trip, of where you're at and then where you're going. And that's one of the things I love about hiking too.
Yes, I have a little girl in my local Colorado Grounded Girls group that said she had never been hiking before. And at the end of our 6-week program, we take a big hike, and we raised money for a local homeless shelter. We raised $800. We were pretty proud of ourselves. But the thing that just really filled my cup on this hike was, there'd be some small boulders, and she was nervous to climb these boulders and nervous coming down. And the other girls would, it's okay, you can do this, and reach their hand out to help her. And you could see the fear on her face. And while she was sitting on top of that boulder, we just talked about what's keeping you from doing this. You are the only thing standing in between you and whatever goal you have set. And these are small little goals for these tween girls that I was working with. And she made her way up and she made her way back down, and she was euphoric from it. Just, oh my gosh, I did it. I did. Did you guys see? I did that. It's how we feel as adults when we hit a goal, but we just aren't as demonstrative about it.
Yeah. Well, and when she gets to other things that may feel really difficult, she can think back on that she made it through that difficult hike, and that could help her get through other things too. So.
You're absolutely right. It's all about what is your pattern. And her pattern of reaching her goals, especially when it came to hiking, was good. Her patterns are good in that way. So we talk a lot about that. And then you're standing up there for a book report and you feel a ton of anxiety and you are nervous about doing your oral report. Well, what's your pattern? Have you always done well standing in front? Have you always come through it and you're alive at the end and you're okay? So it's really just building our patterns and bringing enough mindfulness to them that we recognize what our patterns are.
That's wonderful. I love that. So tell me what you feel like you have learned from mentors along the way of your path, or you can talk about what you've learned while you're mentoring others.
I have had a couple of female mentors in my life, and one of them was in my graduate program. So I was a full-grown woman, but I remember being younger and always wishing that I had a female mentor. I would hear other people talk about their role model or this or that, and I would always think, I need one of those. And one of them came in the form of a professor of mine who saw that I was struggling with imposter syndrome and just really made me feel comfortable in that not only did I belong there, but this is an area that I excel in, and that I had an ability to see people, not just talk to them, not just give them the token, how does that feel, and move forward, but not just be a soft place for them to land, but to really see them and see who they were authentically and help them get there. And so by seeing the best in me, she helped me to see the best in myself and to make sure that I led with that foot when I came across women. Clearly, I know that I keep focusing on women. I have a son, so of course I have a heart for boys as well. I just have really found my area of interest to be in empowering girls and women, and to be the best that they can be, and to understand that who they are today is enough. And I think that's a message that we need to hear over and over again. So my mentors have been women, and they have told me I was enough right then on that day. And even if I didn't do anything else, I was great. And everything that I brought to the table was fine. It was good. It was wonderful. It was enough. And I think that when we treat people in our lives, especially women, because they are dying for this, many of them, when we treat them as if they are enough, they rise to that. They rise to that occasion. If we focus on where they aren't enough, well, we sometimes get caught up in that, and it ruminates in our brain over and over again, and we aren't able to get past it to find the areas that we do excel in. But I just really like to, and I do mentor young girls now, I like to talk about how and treat them as if exactly who they are today is enough. I'm big on giving respect to children. because I do think that they earn it. I know they don't have the same experience as us. I know that they don't have as many years on this earth as us, but they're amazing. And if we treat them with a high level of respect, and if we treat them as if they are the people that they want to become, they're already that person. That's in them. If we treat them like that, it's amazing what they give us back.
Yeah, the respect comes back to you.
Absolutely.
And it's earned that way too.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So I know we've talked about actually implementing mindfulness but do you feel like there's books that people could read that might be influential in helping them better understand mindfulness and how that can help with mental health?
Yeah, one of my very favorite books is a widely known book, and it's not specifically about mindfulness, but what he's talking about is mindfulness, and it's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. That is the very first book. My stepfather, who has since passed, he gave me that book, and it was in my late 20s, and it was my first step into, so I have control of this stuff that's going on in my head. And I love the whole idea. I love every single agreement that he talks about, and he talks about them in depth. That's one of my very favorite ones. Another widely known book that I love, and it is a bit of a struggle to get through, but if you can get through it, it's well worth it, is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I love The Mindful Parent by Dr. Dan Siegel. Dr. Dan Siegel is a mindfulness teacher who, much like myself, uses plain speak. He's not a guru on a mountain. He is just a guy living his life who speaks to us in everyday terms. And he's very easy to understand, and he uses everyday experiences to drive that message home. So I love anything by Dr. Dan Siegel.
Oh, great. We'll have to check him out. What do you feel like are some helpful personal habits that you can implement into your life that are helpful?
Gosh, I have so many. As you can tell, I talk a lot. So let me try and keep it to a minimum. I have a sitting practice every day, usually no more than 15 minutes. I get up a little bit earlier. So for me, I know this isn't an option for everybody, but for me, getting up earlier is a habit that I've created. I get up at 5 every morning before everybody else gets up. I have coffee and some silence. And it doesn't look like meditation always for me because, to be honest with you, I'm not the best meditator. I'm a work in progress in that area. But sitting with my thoughts is valuable. Every day for 15 minutes, I just sit in silence and I just notice what comes up for me that morning. And then I label those thoughts. So when we label our thoughts, it pulls some of the emotion out. That way we're not operating too far out of emotional mind. We've got some rational mind in there as well. So the acronym that I use is NADR, and that's notice, accept, dismiss, return. So I notice what's coming up for me and I label the thought. It might be a planning thought, a stress thought, a worry thought, a happy thought. Then I accept that I'm having it. That looks like empathy. Of course, I'm having planning thoughts. I'm in the last week of school for my children, and I have a lot going on. I dismiss it. For me, that is in my mind. It's using guided imagery. I do a lot of hiking, so there's this really great reservoir over here. I imagine a leaf going across the top of the reservoir. I put my thought that I don't want to ruminate on that leaf, and I watch it float out of my line of sight. And then I return to my moment where I am in this room, where I can feel my legs touching the ground below me. I use grounding techniques to kind of bring myself back to the room. So I notice it, accept, dismiss, and return every day. I also integrate that into my daily interactions with people. If I'm talking to somebody and I'm thinking some thoughts that I'm like, these are self-involved thoughts, or these are defensive thoughts, or anxiety thoughts, then I immediately go to the NADR again. But my notice in that circumstance is, where do I feel this in my body? Is my stomach tight? Do I feel anxious around this person? Am I assuming their motivation in the conversation that they're having with me? I just really try and bring mindfulness into every transaction that I have all day long, and really being in the moment with my kids. And that doesn't mean being positive every second. That means if I'm frustrated with my kids and irritated with my kids, bringing some awareness to that and inviting that in instead of pushing it out and feeling guilty about it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to invite it into my lap and say, okay, you're irritable with your kids today. What could the root of that be? So really just bringing mindfulness into every single thing, every single thing that I do every day has helped me to be more effective in my life. And those are the habits that I just try and carry those through. And I don't want to forget to say, because this is so, so important and was integral in helping me to accept this mindfulness message, is self-care. And for me, self-care looks like hiking, but it should be something that feeds you spiritually and something that energizes you. And exercising energizes me, and nature feeds me spiritually. So that's my go-to for self-care. You have to know yourself well enough. You have to know your body well enough to know, I need to go for a walk or I'm going to bite everybody's head off.
Well, and labeling something really does help you take the emotion out of it and actually be able to deal with it in a very much more rational way, especially as a mother.
For sure.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on around us. If we can kind of label that and decide where that's coming from, then we'll handle it much better. So
I totally agree.
So tell me, what do you feel like some of your long-term goals are going to be, and how is that going to work into the legacy that you hope to leave?
That's a great question. And my answer may not be as fulfilling for you as you would like. I just had lunch with a great friend of mine who is an author, a very well-known author, and she's an amazing person and always puts things in perspective for me. We were talking about that everybody keeps coming to me and saying, so what's next? What are you going to do next? And do you want to write a book? Are you thinking about writing a book? Well, I have an agent, or I have this, or I have that. And which direction do you think you'll go in? And I'll be honest with you, I am not attached to the outcome. I feel like that has worked for me. If I have an idea, I start to brainstorm on that idea. And if people start to respond in a way that feeds me and feeds them, then I feel that that's a direction that I should follow. I know that working with women and working with girls is really a big part of the meat of what drives my passion. And so I know there will be a lot more of that. I really want to get the mindfulness message mainstreamed. I want people to see it as not a guru on a mountain meditating, but as a mom in her kitchen bringing mindfulness to doing the dishes because she needs to calm down a little bit because she's going to react to her children instead of a response that she wants to craft. And I want people to understand that that's accessible to them, inside of them every day. It is a skill. You do have to build it. You do have to practice it in order for it to stay present and fresh. But that's my legacy, I guess, is I want girls to stop the competition. I want them to stop trying to craft ourselves to be something that we feel like society expects us to be, and to see each other as teammates and to reach out and bring each other with us in the good things that we're discovering about ourselves. And that requires finding our authentic self, being really authentic and vulnerable with others, and, not walking away from that wondering what they thought of you. Just walking away from it being proud in who you are and what you brought. Even if you said something you wish you hadn't, bringing some awareness to that and knowing that you're going to grow from that. But I think that I'm trying really hard to not be attached to outcomes, Rebecca. That provides anxiety for me. That doesn't mean I don't have goals, but I think that putting one foot in front of the other and making sure anything I take on feeds me and fills my cup just as much as it does the other person. If I continue to follow that energy, then I'll wind up in the right place.
Yeah. Well, and it does kind of come back to mindfulness. I mean, sometimes when we think about what we want to be down in the future, it really gets depressing to us at the moment. It does take a moment of being happy with where you're at right now versus always looking, of course you want to have goals and stuff, but I'm just saying that sometimes thinking about who you want to be out there can become kind of a daunting task in a way.
Absolutely. And we wind up wishing away our life because we're waiting for that next great thing. And oh my gosh, what if somebody offers me a book deal? Or what if somebody does this? Listen, I am thrilled with where I am today. I really am. And that doesn't mean my life is perfect. It means I am at a place where I dreamed of being, but people are starting to listen to what I have to say. And that is so valuable to me because once people make you feel worthy in what you have to say, for me, that filled my cup at least 50%. And it made me realize that any self-worth issues that I dealt with lied within me and nobody else. So I'm thrilled with where I am today. I'm thrilled with what I've worked for. I feel like I have earned where I am and what I've worked for. And I know that good things will come.
Yeah. To go back with what you were saying too about the competition, sometimes if we can be happy that we have made the progress that we're making, where we're at right now, we will see each other as partners and less as competitors.
Yeah. And even speaking about, I mentioned, that a good friend of mine who's an author, she's 20 steps ahead of me, if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
But I'm so thrilled for her because it was her dream since we were little. And so I think just being able to, and that's that empathy piece. It really is. It's the empathy of, oh my gosh, she has wanted this for years and years. And look, she got what she dreamed of. She got what she worked for. And I couldn't be happier for her. And I believe putting that energy out into the world, it comes back to us.
Oh, great. So before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words for our listeners? And then give us your contact information of how we can get in touch with you.
Okay. I think the only parting words that I would have is just to really never stop trying to seek out your authentic self. And that's when your words and your actions are in line with your values and your morals and who you are inside, what you're thinking inside. If that's in line with what you do every day, and if that's in line with how you treat people, if you don't have to wear a mask out into the world, that's when you feel whole. That's when you feel like you're living your passion, like you are being your best self every day. And that's when, some diagnoses like anxiety and depression, those start to fade away. I'm not saying that it doesn't take some clinical work and maybe in certain cases some medicine, but for the most part, we have everything inside of us that we need today to move forward in our lives. And I just want to send that message out of not losing hope in that area, that try to just make sure you're not wearing a mask that doesn't fit right. And my contact information, I have a Facebook page, it's called Get Grounded. And usually if you type in Get Grounded, it's one of the first ones that come up, but it's also facebook.com/grounded1, ONE, another backslash. I have a blog, which is www.groundedblog.com. My email address is groundedminds@gmail.com. And they can also contact me on my phone, which is 719-671-2589 to inquire about services that I offer, to inquire about Grounded Girls groups or any, work that I do here locally or nationally.
Great. We'll be sure to link all those up on our website as well. And I just want you to know that it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast today and to help light our minds on fire about better mental health and mindfulness. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the invitation so much. I love an opportunity to spread this message, so I'm extremely grateful.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Kerry Foreman, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and get our new monthly newsletter. Then check out the Services tab to see how we can continue to assist you, our fire starters. Also, to help us continue production of inspiring content, go to the Sponsor tab at theluminousmind.net. For more information on sponsorship and affiliate programs, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and now Instagram. Get our free audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider these easy ways. Tell your friends about us. Leave us a review. Share our content. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.